So I'm in Google. So when you do a Docker desktop, the first link which states Docker desktop for Mac and Windows, make sure you also see the URL, which is docker.com. So this is the one that we are interested in. So now there are two options, one to download for Mac and second is to download for Windows. Now do remember, Docker desktop is only available for Mac and Windows. For Linux, we have a different way in which we can download the Docker Community Edition. So I'll click on download for Windows, and here it states that we need to log in to download. So basically this is the website hub.docker.com. So basically you will have to sign up for this. In my case, I already have a login credentials. So I'll click on please log in to download button. So let me put in my username and password here. So I have entered my password. Let's click on sign in. So now do remember this message. It states that this Docker desktop for Windows requires Microsoft Windows 10 Professional or Enterprise 64-bit. Now if you have any previous version like Windows 8 and others, you can make use of Docker Toolbox. So in my case, since we have the Windows 10, we can go ahead and click on Get Docker. So you see it is going ahead and downloading the Docker for Windows exe file here. So the Docker for Windows setup has been downloaded. Now all you have to do is you have to double click on the installer and it will go ahead and install for you. Now in my case, I already have Docker installed because I run a lot of important containers within my desktop. So I'll not be installing it, but anyways, it is pretty straightforward. Now one important part to remember here is that Docker has a dependency on Hyper-V. So if you do not have Hyper-V enabled, during the installation process, Docker will give you a warning saying that the Hyper-V is not enabled, and you can click on OK so that Docker can enable the Hyper-V for you. So let me show you that. From the search bar, if you put Windows features, so this is the one that we're interested in, which is turn Windows features on or off. So within here, you see in my case Hyper-V is enabled, and this is important because if you do not have Hyper-V enabled, Docker will not work. So anyways, you can either enable it previously, so you can enable Hyper-V and containers. So after you enable them, a restart would be required. Anyways, so there are two options. Either you can enable it before you install Docker, or if you do not want to do that, during the installation process of Docker, it will give you a message saying that Hyper-V is disabled, and if you just click on OK, Docker will enable the Hyper-V and containers for you. So that's about it for the installation of Windows. So once you have Docker up and running, basically from the sidebar, you will see that there is an icon of Docker. Now in case if you do not see that, you can even type Docker and you will have an option for Docker for Windows. So if you click on here, it will go ahead and start the Docker for you. Now let's go to the Docker. So this is basically stating that Docker is running. Now if you do a right click over here, you will see that there are multiple options over here. Now if you go to about Docker, this basically gives you the details related to the version associated with Docker. So currently it is 18.06 and this is the Docker Community Edition. Now similarly, when you do a right click here, let's go to settings. So there are a lot of settings which are available over here related to CPU, memory. You have settings related to network, etc. Now the one that we are most interested is in the experimental features. Do remember that like whenever you go ahead and install Docker, the experimental features would be enabled. So make sure that you deselect this and click on apply. Many times what happens is due to experimental features, the required Docker commands do not run because there can be a lot of bugs during the experimental features. So make sure that you go ahead and disable the experimental features. Now once Docker is running, so if you see that the Docker is running here, you can go to your command prompt in Windows, and from the command prompt you can type docker info, and this will give you detailed information related to the Docker. So in my case, it is saying that there are in total of 9 containers. So basically I use Docker for my desktop quite often, and this is the reason why it has so many containers up and running. But with the help of Docker info command, you will be able to see in detail the information related to the Docker. So that's the high level overview about the installation aspect of Docker in Windows.